Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Hope you are all doing well. We have a few connecting to audio. We'll be starting when everyone's done. Okay, so it's now our third week. Well, technically we're still in our second full week, but we're back after 2 weekends. How is everyone doing so far? Can we get like an emoji? Or if you have anything fun that happened over the weekend, please feel free to share right in the chat or unmute your mic even. Okay, so it seems like we are all doing well. That is nice to hear, or at least like nice to see. But yeah, so for today, what we will be doing is we will be completing another online training. Last time it was optional. This time I would actually want everyone to kind of go along it with me. But yeah, just a quick check-in. How many of you have seen the assignment that I posted like 5 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago? Can we get like this one? Have we all seen this yet? Okay, so it's okay if you haven't, but what we will be doing is we'll be completing this Ontario online training. It does apply to a lot of different places as well, but overall it's just nice to have another perspective on what it is like to have professional, like some of the trainings that professionals working with children go through on when it comes to anti-trafficking. So I'll give you guys a minute to kind of just check this out and create a account, and we'll be starting officially at 1:05. This one is a lot quicker than the previous one, mainly because I don't know why, but like going through the steps are a lot more easier. I've also put the login page inside the chat, so if you would want to, please feel free to check it out there. If you have already created an account, this is your time to log in. If you haven't yet, this is your time to create your account. So basically all you have to do is click on, let me go through this page actually, right here. So the link in the chat takes you to this page. If you have an account, log in. If you don't, click on create new account. Fill in your details here. You don't have to fill out city or country. For organization, feel free to fill in future Unchained. And for sector, just choose other. And then once you are done, it sends you an email. You click on the email to verify the account, and you just log in straight from there. And then here is the page that you should land on if you have already logged in. So this is the page that you should land on when you are logging in. I'll just give everyone a second to do this, and then we will start at 1:05. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions or feel free to let me know if you have any questions or issues or account or anything. Sorry, I muted halfway there. Hey Ellie, welcome to today's workshop. What we are doing is we will be completing this online training. So feel free to go to our Google Classroom, and yeah, it should be in the right at the second one. So posted a new assignment, MCIS, blah, 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 blah. It should be this one. And also, if you don't have or don't see it, here is also the link. And feel free to register an account or log in, and then we'll go straight from there. And while you do that, we can actually get started first. So yeah, if you would like to proceed with me, feel free to do so as well. But you can also kind of just click through all the videos later on. So since we all speak English here, we'll click on English first, and then we'll go into training on human trafficking for professionals working with children. So yeah, hi Shinyi. We are just doing this training. You can feel free to see this in the Google Classroom. It's called the MCIS Language Services Online Training Certificate. And we will be working on training on human trafficking for professionals working with children. So feel free to create your account via the link in the chat. And in the meanwhile, we'll get started first, but you can catch up later on. So again, we'll go to home, English, and then we choose our program, and we'll click on enroll me, and now you're enrolled. So it's as easy as this. And yeah, I will be playing the video for us to be able to go through it together. And otherwise, feel free to just kind of chill, take notes, because there will be a quiz at the end. It's a really easy quiz. I don't think I've ever missed a question on the quiz, but that could also be because I just have taken this a lot of times. But yeah, feel free to take notes on anything, and yeah, just chill, take in the information. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll try my best to answer, or we can find out the answer together.
Welcome to the first module of the online training on human trafficking for professionals working with children. The goal of this module is to help you understand fundamental concepts related to human trafficking, the mindset of a trafficked person, the diversity of victim profiles, and the difficulties they face when trying to leave the trafficking situation. By the end of this module, you will be able to define human trafficking, differentiate between domestic and international human trafficking, differentiate between migrant smuggling and human trafficking, identify the risk factors for becoming a victim of human trafficking, identify strategies used by traffickers to recruit and control their victims, and understand the mindset of a trafficked person.
You can access the transcript throughout the training by clicking on the Notes tab in the player. Or L.
So I'll be downloading the transcripts and uploading them into this assignment. So in the meanwhile, feel free to, hold on, let me unzip it first, because otherwise I don't think you'll be, nah, I'll just upload it as a zip. Feel free to unzip it. And then if you need the transcript at any time, feel free to, just download it and use it for your own purposes.
Click here to download the full transcript for the training.
Definition of human trafficking. Human trafficking is a severe violation of human rights through the exploitation of vulnerable people for profit. It was added to Canada's Criminal Code in 2005 and is defined as the recruiting, transporting, transferring, receiving, holding, concealing, harboring, or exercising control, direction, or influence over the movements of a person for the purpose of exploiting them or facilitating their exploitation. This definition contains three major elements: control, exploitation, and threat to safety. Exploitation means causing a person to provide or offer to provide a labor or service by engaging in conduct that could reasonably be expected to cause the other person to believe that their safety or the safety of a person they would know to be threatened if they did not provide the labor or service. According to the law, no one can consent to any of the activities that are part of the definition of human trafficking. United Nations Palermo Protocol. Canada's laws against human trafficking were implemented after Canada signed and ratified the Protocol to Prevent, Suppress, and Punish Trafficking in Persons, especially Women and Children, also known as the Trafficking Protocol or Palermo Protocol. The protocol was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 2000 and ratified by Canada in 2002. The Palermo Protocol outlines the elements of a unified response to human trafficking in terms of what is generally known as the 4 pillars or 4 Ps: prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnerships. The idea behind the 4 Ps is that efforts to combat human trafficking should approach the issue from all angles for an efficient and effective response. This should include preventative measures such as awareness raising and training in key sectors, protection of victims through the creation and implementation of appropriate supports, prosecuting offenders through law enforcement and the criminal justice system, and partnerships between states, governmental and non-governmental agencies, as well as the private sector.
The federal government of Canada has recently included a 5th pillar in the 2019 National Strategy to Combat Human Trafficking, the Empowerment Pillar. Within this pillar, the government promises to provide victims and survivors with the tools they need to regain their control and independence. The government details their plan of empowering youth, testing innovative interventions, and encouraging action from relevant industry partners.
Domestic human trafficking. While the Palermo Protocol addresses human trafficking from an international perspective, it is important to note that the crossing of national boundaries is not a defining element of human trafficking. In fact, movement itself is not a defining element, and often people are recruited and exploited without ever leaving their home communities. Domestic trafficking refers to the trafficking of a person within the boundaries of one country. This means that the entire crime, from recruitment to exploitation, occurs within the same country, and no international borders are crossed in the process. The trafficked person may be a citizen, immigrant, permanent resident, temporary worker, international student, refugee, or any person who is already in the country when they are recruited for the purposes of exploitation. International human trafficking. International trafficking always involves the crossing of at least one international border. This means that the trafficked person is transported through at least 2 countries: the country of origin, usually referred to as the source country, and the country into which they are trafficked, usually referred to as the destination country. Often, persons are being transported through one or more additional countries, or their way from source to destination. These countries are referred to as transit countries. Sometimes trafficked persons cross the border legally, with a valid visa and travel documents, and sometimes border crossing is illegal, with no documents or using fake ones. Being able to correctly distinguish between domestic and international trafficking is extremely important, as the needs of the trafficked persons will be different depending on immigration status in Canada. In addition, the legislation available for laying charges and prosecuting traffickers may also differ. Migrant smuggling definition. Next, it is important for us to look at the similarities and differences between migrant smuggling and human trafficking. Migrant smuggling involves facilitating the illegal entry of a person into a country they are not a national or resident of, with the consent of the person that is being smuggled, and usually involving dangerous travel situations. This can happen either clandestinely or through the use of fake travel documents. It is usually a business transaction between 2 or more individuals, involving a financial or material benefit for the smuggler. The transaction usually ends once the destination country has been reached and any fees have been paid. Importantly, the person being smuggled is not exploited once the destination is reached. Smuggling can sometimes turn into human trafficking when the person that initially consented to the transaction is subsequently deprived of their freedom and forced into an exploitative situation. However, this needs to be determined on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so we kind of hit our first concept over here. So this is a really big difference between international human trafficking and just migrant smuggling. So I guess one of the key word here is consent. Does consent mean that it is legal? No. Both migrant smuggling and human trafficking are illegal crimes. However, human trafficking victims are not voluntarily being trafficked. And migrant smuggling, they are, actually making a deal with the smugglers so that they can get into the country that they want to get into. So that is a really big conceptual difference, and I would recommend taking notes on this. Now, we would get into types of exploitation. So we should be pretty comfortable or familiar with this concept because we've went through it a lot in the past week.
Classification. Cases of human trafficking can be classified based on the type of exploitation involved. The major forms of exploitation that have been identified in Ontario so far are commercial sexual exploitation, forced labor, domestic servitude, forced illegal activities. Click on each of the categories on your screen to find out more about these forms of human trafficking.
Yep, so let's go through these 101.
Human trafficking for commercial sexual exploitation. A large proportion of human trafficking cases that have been documented both internationally and within Canada involve the commercial sexual exploitation of mostly women and girls, but also men and young boys. Traffickers who range from opportunistic pimps posing as boyfriends to large organized crime operations prey on the vulnerability of people and lure them into the sex trade, where they are forced to perform sexual activities, usually working long hours, often in dangerous conditions, without being paid or being allowed to keep only a minimal portion of their earnings. Traffickers control these persons by a variety of means including physical force, threats, and psychological and emotional manipulation. Commercial sexual exploitation happens in a variety of forms from street-level prostitution to the production of pornography. It occurs in a variety of locations such as the streets, nightclubs, massage parlors, strip clubs, escort services, residential brothels, condos, hotels, and over the internet. In Ontario, according to the information that is currently available, the majority of sex trafficking cases are domestic, involving Canadian young women and girls, although international cases and cases involving young men or boys have also been encountered. For example, in a case of commercial sexual exploitation, a trafficker might pose as a boyfriend and shower a young girl with expensive gifts, drugs, and alcohol until one day he tells her she must pay him for these gifts, and will do so by having sex with clients that he will provide. Human trafficking versus voluntary sex work. In order to ensure that appropriate services are offered to your clients, it is essential to recognize that not all sex work is a form of human trafficking. Independent voluntary sex workers maintain control over their working conditions, including their working hours, location, and clients, and keep the money they make. They are free to leave the sex industry if they choose to do so. By contrast, persons who are trafficked into the sex industry are often forced to perform sex acts as well as participate in other sex-related activities, such as pornography or erotic dancing. They do not enter the sex trade by choice, but are coerced into commercial sexual activities through the use of threats, physical force, or deception. They do not have control over their working conditions, do not choose their clients, and are forced to hand over all or most of the money they make to the trafficker or pimp. They are under constant control and monitoring, and do not have the option of exiting or feel that leaving would put them at considerable risk, as we will see in the following modules. In reality, it is often extremely difficult to draw a clear line between voluntary sex work and trafficking, and the majority of cases are positioned in a gray area to overlap between the two. By correctly identifying the situation with all its nuances and intersections, you will be in the best position to offer your client the services they need and want. Remember, however, that making that distinction may not always be straightforward. While people involved in sex work do generally self-identify, trafficked persons hardly ever do, since they may not be aware themselves that they are being trafficked.
I think that by now we can kind of see like a common pattern that is going on, is that a key concept here is consent, because consent just means that, you know, you have human rights and humans have the right to give consent. However, in human trafficking, what are these victims being treated as? They're being treated as commodities. They're being treated as products, as things that just make money, as things. So they don't give consent to the pimp, and they are unable to give consent. And just because they have given consent does not really mean that, you know, they are not being trafficked. So that is just a key what should I say? Yeah, key concept, key word that you should be looking for. Not everything voluntarily is consensual, but in a general case, that is something that you should be watching out for.
Forced labor is another common form of exploitation in the context of human trafficking. The International Labor Organization defines forced labor as all work or service which is exacted from any person under the menace of any penalty, and for which said person has not offered himself voluntarily. The presence of the following elements in a particular case will be a good indicator that it is indeed a case of forced labor. It covers any type of work, service, or employment. It applies to any person, irrespective of age, gender, nationality. It involves some form of menace or penalty, which can range from threats to sanctions to physical and sexual violence. It is not voluntary, meaning the worker did not consent to enter the employment, and they do not have the freedom to leave the employment at any time. In some cases, the worker may have initially consented to the employment, but that consent becomes irrelevant if it is obtained through fraudulent or coercive means, such as deception, false promises, threats, or physical force. For example, a trafficker recruited several men from Hungary with the promise of well-paying jobs in Canada, but upon arrival, they were threatened with violence and forced to work long hours in construction for no pay. Domestic servitude. Domestic servitude is a subset of labor trafficking and happens when a person is exploited in a private household, performing housekeeping work and caring for children and the elderly. They are often kept captive in the house, work long hours with little or no pay, their identity documents are withheld, and they face constant threats and physical and emotional abuse. Both children and adults are held in domestic servitude, usually living with the employer or family that exploits them, in poor conditions with no possibility of a private life, and under constant threat and monitoring. Many of the domestic servitude cases that have come to light in Ontario involve international victims, often entering Canada through the Live-In Caregiver program. For example, a Filipino woman was brought to Canada as a live-in caregiver and promised a higher salary, permanent residency, and the possibility of bringing over her own family. In reality, her pay was reduced, her passport confiscated, and she was forced to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, while being forbidden to leave the house. Human trafficking for forced illegal activities. Another form of human trafficking is forced illegal activities. This happens when a trafficker forces a person to perform illegal activities such as petty theft, credit card fraud, drug muling, and drug dealing. The illegal nature of the activities people are forced to perform turns into a very effective method of control. Knowing that they are conducting illegal activities effectively prevents victims from attempting to escape or contact authorities.
So, as mentioned before, there's acts, means, and purpose, right? So I want people to, I want you guys to all like tattoo that on your forehead, acts, means, and purpose. And one of the means, which, just keeps the trafficked victim from escaping, is that they will be forced to perform illegal activities. For example, the trafficker may tell them to, sell drugs, do illegal things for them. And this way they kind of have, that thing that they can use to just threaten the different trafficked victims, because you are doing something illegal too. Even if you escape from here, you have done something illegal, you will be taken away, and your life will be even worse than when you are with me, when I'm the trafficker, just for example. So this way that the victims cannot escape, and the victims are kept right next to the traffickers. And this is why oftentimes traffickers will use forced illegal activities to, just keep the victims as a means of preventing them from escaping.
Though anyone can become a victim of human trafficking, irrespective of nationality, ethnicity, age, gender, or socioeconomic status, there are certain categories of the population that are more vulnerable to being caught in exploitative situations. A person's vulnerability to become trafficked is often explained in terms of a set of interrelated push and pull factors. Push factors are forces that act to drive people away from a particular place or situation. These include extreme poverty, unemployment, lack of education, inadequate social programs, gender-based inequality, war and conflict situations, and political unrest. Pull factors, on the other hand, are forces which drive people toward a new location in hopes of finding better opportunities and a better life. Pull factors include our current globalized free market economy, which has increased the demand for cheap labor, goods, and services in many countries, as well as the commercialization and commodification of sex.
So just as an example, if I was really, really poor, if I were to be really, really poor and I needed a new job, so I got tricked and I was trafficked, in this example, what are the push factors and what are the pull factors? Please type it in the chat. Feel free to share it with everyone, or you can just share it with me as well. If I were to be trafficked because I was really, really poor and I needed a new job, what are the pull factors? What are the push factors? We're getting some answers here. Push factors, poverty, unemployment. Pull factors, large demand for manual labor. Economy, demand for labor. Pull factor, promising for a better living environment. Push is unemployment. Pull factor is demand for labor. Pull factor, job opportunities. Yep. Everyone's on the right track. So there are differences between push and pull. And I think once you kind of, imagine if, you have something pushing you into the industry or pulling you into industry, attracting you, then, this is how people are lured into the game. And that being said, acts, means, and purpose. Of acts, means, and purpose, what is push and pull factors a part of? Is it acts, means, or purpose? Do we have an answer? Please feel free to type it in the chat. We have someone saying act. Yeah, for sure. Act is definitely because, this is why the victims are getting into the game, but also it is kind of part of the purpose as well, right? Because this can also be applied to the traffickers themselves. So why are the traffickers into this? What is pulling the traffickers into the industry? So everything is like a two-way road. There isn't really one specific answer, and a lot of times we have to examine it case by case.
Vulnerabilities. Economic, political, or social instability can uproot adults or children from their family, community, or home. Those who are left, homeless, migrants, and those with few or no options for employment may find the offer of a trafficker attractive. Women are particularly vulnerable when they are considered to have fewer opportunities than men. For instance, they may have little access to education, employment, or health care, or they may not receive equal pay for equal work. In each of these cases, the trafficker may appear to offer a way out of unfavorable circumstances. A person may even believe a trafficker loves them. Although it is true that some people are recruited by abduction or kidnapping, the majority of victims are trafficked by someone they know and trust, as traffickers will build relationships with a person with the intent of later exploiting them. Vulnerable groups in Canada. Let us now take a look at some populations that are particularly vulnerable to trafficking in Canada.
These include youth, Indigenous women and girls, as well as temporary migrant workers.
Remember, this does not mean others are not vulnerable. Anybody can be a victim of human trafficking. Click on each of the buttons on your screen to learn more about each category. Vulnerable youth. Young people in their teens are one of the most vulnerable populations, especially when they come from harsh backgrounds that involve broken families, a history of abuse, growing up in a group home, or running away from home. Age in itself is an important factor, as the early teen years are a period of transition for youth, with all the emotional and physical changes that accompany puberty. Traffickers look for insecure young people with low self-esteem and often approach them in public places, such as malls, bus stations, sporting events, and around schools, shelters, group homes, and online through social media websites. The majority of human trafficking cases that are being identified in Ontario involve the commercial sexual exploitation of young women and girls. While there is very little evidence on the extent to which young boys are also being targeted, the phenomenon is likely more widespread than existing statistics would indicate.
Indigenous women and girls. Canada's history of colonization, discrimination and marginalization of the Indigenous population explains why it is one of the most vulnerable groups when it comes to human trafficking. This vulnerability is linked to the numerous systemic barriers that Indigenous communities face today, such as widespread poverty, violence, substance dependency, mental health issues, high suicide and abuse rates, abusive relationships and poor health, which are seen as the legacy of the residential school system and other discriminatory policies directed against Indigenous people. All these factors intersect in complex ways, leading to vicious cycles of abuse and exploitation experienced by Indigenous individuals and communities, and an increased vulnerability to being trafficked.
Vulnerability of temporary migrant workers. The dynamic of push and pull factors is evident in the case of temporary foreign workers who come to Canada, attracted by promises of a better life, and see temporary work offers here as an opportunity to escape poverty and the lack of opportunities in their home countries. Their lack of understanding of Canadian realities and their rights as migrant workers coupled with language barrier and lack of access to services, often exposes them to abusive situations and labor exploitation. Who are the traffickers? Now that we have looked at factors that make people vulnerable to being trafficked, it is also important to ask, who are the traffickers? Traffickers can be opportunistic individuals, small groups of people operating a family criminal enterprise, or members of large organized crime groups. Cases have also been documented of parents or other family members selling the children in their care into sexual exploitation, either in the context of abject poverty or in order to feed a substance addiction. Recruitment strategies. Let us now look at the various strategies that traffickers use to recruit people. Saving the victim. In many cases, a trafficker will start by identifying a need in their targeted victim, such as food, shelter, money, love, or reaffirmation of self-worth. Once they have identified their victim's needs, they will pose as someone there to help and support their targeted person by offering exactly what they need. For example, a job, money, affection. After they have established control over their victim, the situation quickly turns into one of exploitation. Deceptive job offers. In international trafficking cases, traffickers often use deceptive job offers to attract foreign workers only to exploit them in the commercial agriculture, construction, hospitality, and other non-unionized industries. Victims recruiting victims. In cases of sex trafficking, young people who are being exploited are the ones who do the recruiting on behalf of the traffickers. Law enforcement and service providers in Ontario often mention cases of young girls luring their peers into the commercial sex trade on the streets or in group homes so that they may earn some privileges for themselves, hoping to be able to escape exploitation one day. Once a person has been recruited, traffickers are resourceful in ensuring control over their victims through a variety of means ranging from physical force to subtler forms of intimidation and manipulation. Some of the most common methods of control are instilling fear through acts of violence or witnessing acts of violence, controlling a person's basic needs, such as food, sleep, and medical attention, threatening deportation in cases where the victim has precarious immigration status, confiscating victims' ID documents, passport, driver's license, social insurance card, or health card, threatening harm to victim's family, social isolation in order to create total dependency on the trafficker, rewarding victims who follow the trafficker's rules and putting victims against each other, debt bondage, where the person is made to provide services as repayment for a loan, but through a variety of tactics used by the trafficker, including interest, fines for breaking rules, etc. The amount that the person is working towards repaying keeps increasing.
Started owing more money, also came the threats and the violence. That you're going to get us the money, you're going to this, and after a bit of a breakdown of figuring that I had no choices, the best way I can put it is, I saw no way out. I was being beaten up and attacked, and eventually started surrendering any sense of will that this is how it is and I owe this much money and I'm going to have to do whatever they say.
Related to these control mechanisms are many barriers that make it complicated for victims to self-identify and seek out help. They fear the trafficker will hurt them or someone they love if they come forward. They are afraid they may get arrested and prosecuted for being involved in illegal activities. They are in love with the trafficker and hope that by doing what they are told, they will regain the attention and caring they had in the early stages of the relationship. They feel that if they leave the current situation, they will have nowhere else to go. They are dealing with drug and alcohol dependency and may feel they must stay with their trafficker in order to access the substance they are addicted to. International victims, especially those with precarious immigration status, face additional barriers to self-identifying and exiting. They may be unaware of their rights and available services in Canada. Experience language barriers leading to feelings of confusion, doubt, and anxiety. They feel there is no one they can trust and who can help them. Fear of deportation because their identification documents are being held by their trafficker. Though the living and working conditions are substandard in Canada, they may still be better than conditions back home. In addition, they may try to avoid a loss of face to family members back home who believe their loved one is leading a wealthy and successful life in Canada.
So now that we are done with part one, we have went through vulnerable situations, recruitment strategies, how the victims are controlled, as well as some barriers that they could have to self-identification. See, we're like 25% done with the training. It's a really short one. And now we will get into some general signs of recruitment and trafficking indicators. This should be pretty similar to the red flags that we have talked about. However, they will have additional information specifically
Welcome to the second module of the online
specifically to child abuse and child trafficking.
For the purposes of this training, we consider a child to be any person under the age of 18. Please note that in Ontario, a child must be referred to a Children's Aid Society before their 16th birthday in order to be eligible for service, and if a child becomes involved with CAS before their 16th birthday, they may be eligible to continue receiving support beyond their 16th birthday if there is court involvement. Now let's look at the profile of a child human trafficking victim. In Ontario, the majority of human trafficking victims are female Canadian citizens, typically Caucasian, and between 14 and 28 years old. Of these, approximately 40% are under the age of 18 and are most vulnerable when they need financial support or desire love and affection. Many are runaway children who have experienced sexual abuse and substance use and have strained family, school, and community relationships. Though these characteristics are common in cases of trafficked children, not all victims fit this profile. More and more, traffickers are successfully luring youth from stable backgrounds into the world of manipulation and exploitation.
They're looking to recruit the young woman that doesn't look like she has a very high self-esteem. I know for me, one of my dead giveaways growing up, never walked with my head up. But there's just a sadness that these predators for some reason have an ultra-sense radar for.
They can pick up on it.
They can pick up on it. They know exactly what girls look for. They will see a pack of young women, you know, together by all means to protect themselves, and they will know immediately the one girl in that pack that they can hit on and draw away. Grew up in an upper middle class family.
I had a very strict family.
An adopted family, so harsh background.
My family was one way at church, one way at home.
I grew up in the beaches. I grew up in an upper class family in the beaches.
I had just left a college program. I didn't want to go back to school. I wasn't sure what to take or what to do. I didn't know what path to take.
I ran away when I was 14.
On my own at the age of 16.
By the time I was about 12, I was leaving home. And, you know, the more traumatic part of my story, I guess, begins there.
Though international trafficking is less common in Ontario, it is still useful to know the kinds of children who might be trafficked over international borders. In general, internationally trafficked children can include asylum seekers, unaccompanied or separated minors, teenage migrant workers, children who have arrived in Canada with an adult posing as a parent, and irregular migrants, older adolescents who may have migrated illegally or prolonged their stay in a country without getting authorization. Furthermore, children can be victimized by human trafficking indirectly when a caregiver is trafficked. Children can be present or born into situations of domestic servitude where sexual assault results in pregnancy, forced marriage, where there can also be elements of trafficking, and cases of commercial sexual exploitation where mother or even a father are being exploited. In such cases, though the child is not directly exploited, they can still experience immense trauma from witnessing a parent endure such abuse. Pay attention to any signs of trauma in children and be alert to the possibility of parents being trafficked. Traffickers are endlessly resourceful in devising strategies to deceive and gain control over people they intend to exploit. As we saw in Module 1, youth are particularly vulnerable to these deceptive tactics because of their lack of experience and knowledge and their need to be loved and appreciated. Furthermore, while recruitment tactics are extremely varied in Canada, the majority of trafficked persons are recruited by someone they know. A dynamic of push and pull factors comes into play when recruiting a youth to a trafficking situation, in particular in the case of youth coming from troubled backgrounds. They are pushed away from situations in which they have had to deal with issues, such as abusive relationships, poverty, or unstable homes, and pulled by promises of a better life, security, and affection. In Ontario, traffickers often use the tactic of grooming or love bombing. This strategy involves a trafficker approaching a person, usually a young girl, with promises of caring and affection, and showering her with gifts and attention. The trafficker gains control over their victim by meeting their needs, and may convince the girl that he is her boyfriend, with the intention of eventually manipulating her into the commercial sex industry. A trafficker who uses this technique may also be referred to as a Romeo pimp. There is an entire subculture of pimping across North America that is very much present in Ontario as well. Pimps have an elaborate set of rules and strategies, including a common language to lure young girls into the commercial sex industry, which they refer to as the game. Training manuals and videos are widely available over the internet, recommending the best ways of recruiting and then controlling, manipulating, and exploiting young girls in the sex trade. This form of trafficker is very confusing for youth who may not understand or have experience with healthy relationships or boundaries and may believe that her trafficker is her boyfriend and loves her despite his exploitative behavior. Click on the link on your screen to read more on the game and the mechanisms of domestic sex trafficking. You can also access our glossary of street terms by clicking on the link on your screen or through our additional resources.
The recruitment process in cases of trafficking involving Indigenous victims is often similar to the luring process used for other youth. However, due to the remote location of many reserves, and the lack of transportation options between reserves and other communities, the practice of hitchhiking adds another layer of vulnerability for these youth. Also, group homes and youth shelters are common places where traffickers target potential victims, and Indigenous girls are particularly exposed, given the high numbers of Indigenous youth in the child welfare system.
Let us now look at the indicators of human trafficking, including the signs of control and manipulation, and the physical and emotional impacts commonly seen in children who have been trafficked.
So now we'll be getting into the indicators of child trafficking. we also call this the red flags. We'll have another red flag session with Homera, but feel free to check out what this training has to say first.
In this section, you will be presented with a set of indicators that may point to a potential human trafficking situation. Please note that not all indicators need to be present in order for someone to be a potential trafficked person. Some cases may present only 1 or 2 red flags, while others will have significantly more. It is also important to note that just because 1 or more of these indicators are present does not necessarily mean that the person is being trafficked. Use your best judgment when trying to identify a child victim of human trafficking. So how can you tell that a person is being trafficked? Regardless of the type of trafficking situation, victims may present any of the following signs that they are being controlled and manipulated. In general, they may show signs of fear, anxiety, depression, hypervigilance, or intimidation. Show signs of physical abuse, such as injuries or bruises or sexual abuse. Show signs of poor health, poor hygiene, or malnutrition. Show signs of substance use or self-harm behaviors such as cutting. Wear inappropriate clothing for the weather or situation. Be accompanied by someone else who speaks on their behalf. Have no access to personal identification documents or have fake ones. Have no personal possessions or money. Not know their address and be unfamiliar with the surroundings. Show signs of branding or scarring that indicates ownership by the trafficker. Distrust authorities and act as if they were instructed by someone else. Have limited or no contact with their family and friends and limited or no social interaction and supports. There are many physical indicators associated with the ill treatment and neglect a child may have experienced while being trafficked. These indicators can include malnourishment, dental problems, stunted growth, developmental delays, infectious diseases, poor hygiene, eye problems, respiratory illness, muscular and joint pain, exhaustion, hearing impairment, and more. Abuse in the form of coercion may also occur during trafficking and can include rape, torture, or corporal punishment. Teachers, through their daily interaction with children and youth, are in a unique position to identify early signs of trafficking. Children who are being trafficked may present with certain indicators at school, including trouble concentrating, violent outbursts or aggression, low self-esteem, showing up hungry, showing signs of depression, missing school, decline in their school performance, apathy, fear or anxiety, or using language associated with the game. Also pay attention to who is picking up and dropping a child off at school, and if a girl starts talking about a new boyfriend and begins wearing designer clothes, handbags, shoes, etc. Though there can be rational explanations for these indicators, their presence should alert school staff to the potential of child trafficking.
So one of the key things that, last year we interviewed a trafficking survivor, and one of the key things that she told us was that oftentimes people put their kids in places where they think are safe, for example, in malls, at schools, when, in fact, a lot of times people who have built trust with the children are also very dangerous because they will be taking advantage of that trust and the safe looking environment to actually, do whatever they want to the kids. So there are a lot of school indicators that the schools are a problem. There are also a lot of indicators that other places are a problem. So one of the movies that what was her name? Homera recommended to us, called Little Tickles, was that the main character, she grew up just didn't really like enjoying going to a man's house because she just didn't like the vibe there. And her mom just kind of forced her because, they think that the man's a family friend and so she should be nice. But a lot of times we should really just trust what the kids have to say. And if they are uncomfortable, there may be a reason behind why they are feeling this way.
On top of these symptoms, a child held in captivity may develop disturbances in their sense of time, memory, and concentration, may suffer a loss of self-esteem, and may have a sense of hopelessness in the future. Some children may also experience traumatic amnesia, where they forget what happened to them. Personality disorganization or disassociation can also be a result of the prolonged and very severe abuse, and therefore can be an indicator of trafficking. Children may also carry unexpressed anger against those who hurt them or against people who failed to help, and it can turn into self-hatred and suicidal thoughts. Let us now look at indicators specific to commercial sexual exploitation. Based on current information and research, the commercial sexual exploitation of women and girls is the most common form of human trafficking taking place in Ontario today. In addition to the general signs of indicating control and exploitation, persons trafficked in the commercial sex industry may also indicate they have a pimp, manager, or boyfriend, indicate they have to meet a daily quota of earnings from selling sexual services, indicate they have to hand over the money made from selling sexual services, have a cell phone but don't know their number, engage in sexual activities in exchange for food, shelter, drugs, or other basic necessities, have few items of clothing, usually of the type associated with selling sexual services, only know how to say sex-related words in English in the case of international victims, use slang related to the sex industry, talking about the game, turning tricks, Johns, and so on. Young girls wearing designer clothes, shoes, or purses, especially if they are living in care or in a group home. Youth who have been sexually exploited may struggle with sexually transmitted infections, including HIV or AIDS, unwanted pregnancy or motherhood, early motherhood and possible health complications, depression, poor social skills, anger and hostility, inability to trust and build meaningful relationships, blurred roles and boundaries, sexualized behaviors, guilt, shame, feeling different from others, isolation, substance use and misuse, self-harm, including suicide. Persons trafficked for commercial sexual exploitation may act in particular ways that can indicate they are being trafficked. Trafficked persons may be hostile, uncooperative, manipulative, may be fearful and untrusting of authorities, including police, may be afraid of the trafficker or boyfriend, may not see themselves as a victim, may look older than they are, may feel loyalty towards trafficker or boyfriend, may have been instructed to lie, may be intoxicated, may be experiencing traumatic stress. Professionals who work with children should also be alert of trafficking if a youth starts talking about a new boyfriend but will not introduce him to anyone, or if she begins to disappear for days on end, return home, and then disappear again. This can be a sign that she is being circulated on what is known as a track. A track can be an area of town or a group of cities where traffickers rotate their girls in order to provide constant variety for their Johns. Before we conclude this module, let's look at the role that addictions play in the recruitment, control, and exploitation of youth, and the indicators associated with addiction. Addictions play an enormous role in the trafficking of youth and adults, and can be a pre-existing behavior representing a factor of vulnerability or one that is introduced by the trafficker. In fact, in many cases, the first instance of exploitation is with a drug dealer when victims are children or youth and they are forced, coerced, tricked, or talked into trying drugs and then exploited or introduced into the sex trade in order to support their habit. Drugs and alcohol may be used by a trafficker in order to abduct a victim or as a method of control to encourage compliance and discourage running away, as well as to create a dependence on the trafficker. A trafficker may also take photos or videos of a victim using drugs or alcohol, and then use these as a method of coercion by threatening to expose the person's substance use to their friends and family. Substances may be used by a trafficked person as a form of self-medication to cope with physical and emotional trauma. As we touched on in Module 1, a history of trauma and abuse contributes to the risk of being trafficked. This goes hand in hand with addictions, as traumatized people may live with mental health symptoms, such as PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and may have developed a substance dependency in an effort to help cope with their mental health symptoms. In the trafficking situation, substances can also be used by a victim to help with long hours, exhaustion, and severe environmental conditions such as extreme heat and cold. Lisa grew up in rural northern Ontario. When she was 14, she left to escape the physical and sexual abuse she experienced as a child. When she arrived in Thunder Bay, the people she was supposed to stay with no longer agreed to take her in. With no other friends or relatives, Lisa stayed at a shelter and on the streets where she met other youth in similar situations. While at a party one night, Lisa was introduced to crack. After partying for several days with the same group of youth, they were told that they now owed for the drugs and booze they consumed and would be turning tricks to pay for it. Lisa was forced to have sex with men that frequented the home they were partying at. The pimp who ran the house continued to supply Lisa and her new friends with drugs and provide protection in exchange for the money they made selling sex.
Okay, so I have 2 questions for you guys. Please feel free to type it in the chat. First question is, what are the acts, means, and purpose of this case? And second, what are the push and pull factors that either lured Lisa into the trick, into the game, or either kept Lisa into the game? So 2 questions. First one, what is the acts, means, and purpose? The second one is, what are the push and pull factors? I'll give you guys a minute to enter your answers in the meeting chat. Let's give you guys one more minute because we need to kind of, move on to the next section. So we have one answer that is public, and I'll read that out loud. So Act Lisa owed money for the drugs she used, was given drugs in return for having sex, means she used drugs, purpose, trafficker most likely earned money. I would say that you definitely got the purpose right. Means you are halfway right about that, but the means is actually that she's addicted because she now needs the drugs. And the act, I would honestly say, yeah. So I think Bill provided a more has a thorough answer for this. So the trafficker got Lisa addicted and told her that she was in debt. So a lot of the debt is also an act, and it's a factor. And also the fact that Lisa was, she has like no supervisor around her. So remember this sentence: when she arrived in Thunder Bay, she had to escape the physical and sexual abuse. She arrived in Thunder Bay, no other relatives, and she stayed at the shelter. And then the traffickers used drugs and telling her that she was in debt to lure her into trafficking, sexual trafficking. And Jessica shared the push and pull factors. So push factors, the abuse she received as a child. Yep, she has no one to care for her. And the pull factor is her drug addictions, as well as a feeling of protection. 100%.
Parental addictions can also contribute to the vulnerability of a child, as they may be more likely to run away or be apprehended, and may turn to non-familial activities, associate with sexual exploitation, in order to find a sense of belonging. The most common drugs used in the trafficking situation are crack, cocaine, benzos, meth, heroin, and other opiates. Some physical indicators associated with these substances include sunken or gaunt facial features, poor dental, hair, and skin health, appearance of malnourishment, welts on the face or arms from picking, track marks, runny or bleeding nose, dilated or constricted pupils. If you encounter a child or youth who shows signs of addiction, be on alert for other indicators associated with human trafficking.
And that concludes our second part, Unit 2, of working with children, general signs of recruitment and trafficking indicators. So there is a lot of resources that you can see at the end of the page. If you want to access on your own, where is it? I don't even know. Oh yeah, right here. If you do have anything that you're interested in, feel free to look through. And now we will begin our third part. And then there will be a quiz for you at the end. And I think you can complete the quiz multiple times. And once you are at a 60% or above, it's really easy quiz, you will be able to get your certificate. So I guess yeah, I'll start playing, but if you guys want like a bathroom break, if you guys want some water break, feel free to, just do whatever you want.
There are some important principles and guidelines that are recommended to ensure trafficked children are offered appropriate supports that meet their unique needs in an effective and empowering way without putting their safety at risk. Let's take a look at some of them. In order to provide services to a trafficked child, one of the first things service providers need to do is build rapport based on trust and respect. You can earn a child's trust by approaching them with an open and non-judgmental attitude, explaining your role clearly, and letting them know how you can help them. Be careful not to mislead children about what you can and cannot do to help them. You need to make them feel you believe their story and you understand how difficult it is for them to trust and reach out to you. You should always be honest and follow through with any promises you have made. As you start building trust, you will also be able to help them understand that they are a victim of a crime and they are not being blamed for their actions, and help them believe that you can and will offer them support to meet their needs. Do no harm. Trafficking situations often involve high risk for the trafficked person, as well as their loved ones. Victims are often in a fragile state, and the potential for increased trauma is always present. This is especially true when working with children and youth, as they are in a sensitive stage of development and still rely on adults for support and protection. Service providers have an obligation to assess each situation and interact carefully and determine the potential for harm of any proposed action. If an action can make a child worse off than before, then it should not be taken. Provide individualized care. While there are some common elements that define trafficking situations, each person's individual story will involve specific circumstances that make it distinct and unique. Service providers should endeavor to use their best judgment in assessing every case based on available information and responding to the child's needs in a personalized way that is most appropriate under the circumstances. Self-determination and participation is another important principle. Trafficked children need to be empowered and encouraged to participate in decisions that affect them at a level that is appropriate for their developmental stage. If possible, present a number of options and clearly explaining the consequences of each possible course of action, and support them while they make their choices about their care. Confidentiality is essential in order to protect the client. Organizations have their own policies regarding confidentiality, and these provisions should be clearly explained to child clients in an age-appropriate way. It is also important to ensure the child is informed about the implications of sharing information with other organizations in the course of referrals and how this could impact confidentiality. Non-discrimination is essential. It is a responsibility of all service providers to offer the best possible assistance without discrimination on the basis of gender, age, disability, race, ethnicity, religion, language, sexual orientation, gender identity, political beliefs, or status. This is a moral responsibility as well as a legal obligation under the Ontario Human Rights Code. Assess the risks and be prepared for emergency intervention. Most trafficking situations pose considerable risks to the person's safety. It is important to be familiar with the person's situation so as to be able to assess the level of risk at each stage and have a well-developed strategy in place for responding in case the client believes their safety or the safety of a loved one is in immediate danger. The best interest of the child should be the leading principle that guides all assistance and protection provided to child victims of human trafficking. Now let's look at best practices for conducting interviews with trafficked children. The questions that you ask will depend on the information you already have about the child's situation and the circumstances under which they came to you. When deciding what questions you will ask and whether you will mention human trafficking in the conversation or not, you may consider some of the following. Who is the trafficked child? What age are they? Were they referred by someone? Did they come on their own? What is their comfort level in talking to you? Are they being talkative or are they more withdrawn? What kinds of information are you looking for? Do not make assumptions. Phrase your questions so that they do not appear judgmental and do not suggest any answers. It is important to remember that traffickers go to great lengths to ensure the loyalty of their victims, making it crucial that you separate them from others who may be involved in the trafficking scene before asking them questions about the situation they are in. If their trafficker or other people involved in the situation are present, it is unlikely that they will tell you what is going on for fear of reprisal from the trafficker. Psychological control is an enormous barrier to accessing help, and separating a victim from others involved may allow them to reach out for the support they need to exit the trafficking situation. Also, remember that they may not present as a good victim. They may be hostile, uncooperative, and untrusting, but this does not necessarily mean they do not want or need help. People who have been trafficked have experienced severe physical and psychological traumas, including traumatic life events prior to being trafficked. Their behaviors can represent survival tactics that have kept them alive in extreme and hostile conditions. Be patient and focus on building trust, and eventually a trafficked person may be able to accept your help. Trauma-informed care. For the purpose, it is events prior to being trafficked. Their behaviors can represent survival tactics that have kept them alive in extreme and hostile conditions. Be patient and focus on building trust, and eventually a trafficked person may be able to accept your help. Trauma-informed care is also very important in the interview stage with a trafficked child. Let's start by defining what we mean by trauma-informed care. For the purpose of this training, we consider trauma-informed care to be services that understand the role of current and past traumas on a person's presenting symptoms and behaviors. In order to provide trauma-informed care, those who work with children must know how to provide services, conduct interviews, and make referrals without re-victimizing or triggering the child, who may be highly sensitive and vulnerable at the time they access your services.
Yep. So I'm sorry for the misclick, but also when they say like make referrals, it just means that you are referring them to the service that they need. However, at the same time, you want to refrain from telling them that you are in trouble, or you are not normal, you are in a really weird situation. You want to refrain from telling them that, and just simply let them know that there is support that they would need, and that you are willing to provide the support or introduce them to the support that they need.
Part of offering trauma-informed services to youth is recognizing that for a victim of commercial sexual exploitation, it can take multiple attempts before they leave their trafficker for good. Remain supportive and non-judgmental, even if they go back to a trafficker, recognizing the complexities of the situation, the person's trauma, and their need to make decisions for themselves. If you preserve a relationship of trust and good rapport with them, they will be able to reach out to you if and when they are ready to leave their trafficker for good. This goes along with the concept of meeting a client where they are at. Meeting a client where they are at requires that you take into account how a child is experiencing a situation and where they are in the stages of change. This is especially relevant for youth being trafficked for commercial sexual exploitation, who may believe they are in a relationship with their trafficker and that their trafficker loves them. Insisting to a young girl that her boyfriend does not love her and that he is actually a trafficker may not be the best way to build rapport and gain her trust. Consider reviewing the stages of change and planning services that are relevant to each person's unique circumstances. This approach embraces harm reduction and strengths-based philosophies, which recognize that clients possess intrinsic value regardless of behaviors they are engaging in. The stages of change are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance. A youth in the pre-contemplation stage who does not understand or feel that they are being exploited should be approached very differently from a child who is actively seeking help to exit a trafficking situation and would be in the action stage. You can find more information about the stages by clicking on the link on your screen. Now let's look at some resources available that are directed specifically at conducting interviews with children. The Attorneys for Children Guide for Interviewing Clients provides insights on how to hold interviews with children. This guide will help you to understanding how trauma affects a child's thinking and behaviors, and will help you to conduct an interview where a trafficked child will feel safe and be able to answer your questions to the best of their ability. Here are some of the tips included in this resource. Create a comfortable environment for the child. Sit beside the child instead of across from them. Consider the child's level of language development. Use open-ended questions and keep questions simple and concise. Recognize that a traumatized child is very susceptible to shame. Any experience of embarrassment may be converted immediately as shame. Listen attentively to the child and validate the child's feelings. Avoid creating unnecessary stress for the child whenever possible. There are many more helpful tips in this guide. You can access the full document by clicking on the link on your screen. Another resource for those who may come in contact with trafficked children is the UNICEF guidebook, Let's Talk: Developing Effective Communication with Child Victims of Abuse and Human Trafficking. The general tips for interviewing outlined by Let's Talk include the following. Interviews should take place as soon as possible after the allegation or suspicion of abuse emerges. The child should feel supported and safe during the interview. Interviews should take place in an informal setting and be conducted by interviewers trained to talk with children. If possible, interviews should not be too long to avoid tiring the child. The child's development stage and needs should be considered in planning the interview. The characteristics of the child's family background, and the interviewer should be considered in planning the interview. The children should be given an opportunity to tell their story in their own way before they are asked explicit questions. The questions should begin with open questions, and direct or leading questions should be reserved for the latter part of the interview. Props and cues may be used, but only with caution. The guide offers further suggestions for interviewing with adolescents specifically. These include understanding the development stage of adolescence, establishing trust and rapport without being patronizing, relating with openness to the adolescent's experiences, being non-judgmental, offering reassurance and support, setting appropriate boundaries, accepting volatile emotions in adolescence, understanding the effects of stress and traumatic memories for adolescents, understanding the effects of sexual abuse, arranging support from the adolescent's peer group, understanding the impact of gender differences in adolescence, understanding the impact of cultural differences in adolescence, identifying and offering appropriate resources and referrals, helping to restore and improve self-esteem. You can find much more helpful information in the full document accessible in our additional resources section or by clicking on the link on your screen.
Okay, so because of time restraints, I'm actually going to kind of just like speed run the the rest of this unit and next unit.
If you are working
And
with a
so,
trafficked
I
child,
won't be
they may
talking
require
anymore for
immediate
the
medical
rest of
care
this unit.
and an extensive medical exam. Children can incur physical injuries in the trafficking situation and may also.
Or actually, let me just quickly go through the rest of this unit. So basically the part for this medical care, to summarize, is that there could be a lot of physical injuries and aftermath of this, of the trauma or the traumatic experience. And I think some of you guys have already done research regarding physical industry, not physical industry, physical aftermaths and impact of human trafficking. So there are a lot of diseases, or maybe not diseases, or like sicknesses or problems that could happen. And so it is really crucial to be observant and provide the children and adolescents with the medical care that they need. And at the same time, there's also this legal aspect of the medical care that these children are going to receive. For example, whether it was from like abuse, and whether, what happened or who was involved, or whether the child was bribed to, shut up about this issue, or, who was responsible for like, spreading the message of this abuse, or is the child ready to tell someone about the abuse at all? And there's just a lot of physical and mental and legal aspects that people should consider when it comes to the medical care of trafficked children.
Here are
And
some
also
tips.
at the same time, there should also be a test to see whether the medical exam is appropriate for age. Again, notes on the screen, but also there should, something that I also want to say is that we should also be, how should I say, we should also be aware that these children may really be sensitive about someone touching them physically. So even if it's a medical situation where we think it is 100% safe, oftentimes for these children, it triggers their traumatic experiences and they may be uncomfortable doing the exams. So even if, you are 100% sure that the doctor is a nice person and this exam overall is beneficial for the trafficked child, you should also encourage participation and take it slowly, be patient, and lead them throughout the entire journey. And when it comes to us LGBTQ plus youth, there are a lot of barriers that they have been, facing. And so a lot of times you should be just treating them the way that you would treat an ally, and also try to minimize the tone of discrimination that may trigger their experiences and their trauma. And also, lastly, you want to try to use inclusive tones and just be aware of confidentiality. And you should also offer support and make referrals with sensitivity. And just try to basically prioritize the children that you are working with. And when it comes to Indigenous youth or, Native people that Americans say, a lot of times these people are isolated from the mainstream society because of their marginalization. And they also have experienced racism and low self-esteem. And so when they are not really contacting with the communities and they don't really know about the available resources, it is really important for us, if you were going to work with children at any time, to provide them with a guideline and let them know that the society is also for them and that they are welcome to look for any resource that they need. And communication is important, so you should also just advocate for equitable and culturally safe care. And that concludes Unit 3. We have half an hour, so I think we should be able to go through Unit 4. But Unit 4 is mainly on regulations and referrals. So when you are, referring someone to a to a specialist, to a expert of that specific part. I think I don't want to go through the criminal code just because, a lot of you guys aren't based in Canada and it's kind of, useless for you guys to watch this part, but I will go straight into police because a lot of times these traffic survivors do not want the police to get involved immediately. They may need time to prepare themselves. They may need time to just process the overall information. So we'll be starting with police in Unit 4.
The police play a crucial part in addressing the issue of human trafficking by investigating cases and prosecuting the offenders. As a service provider working with children, if you identify a trafficking situation, your first priority is to ensure the safety of this child. Police can ensure the immediate safety of the victims, and many units have developed key partnerships with community agencies in order to link victims to essential services and supports. These partnerships have developed as a result of a shift in the way police are approaching human trafficking cases, moving from criminalizing the victims who are often forced into some form of illegal activity or have precarious immigration status, towards acknowledging the need of protecting these individuals. Anti-human trafficking enforcement and prosecution efforts by leading police units now focus on the traffickers, while victims are offered support and referrals to community agencies and services. Policing services in Ontario are divided into regional police departments,
Indigenous policing units,
and the Ontario Provincial Police. The OPP monitors areas that do not have a local police force. The Ontario Provincial Police, especially through the Provincial Organized Crime Enforcement Team, POCET, ensures law enforcement through independent investigations, joint investigations with other law enforcement teams, as well as intelligence gathering in relation to human trafficking. Some regional police services have also responded to the growing number of human trafficking cases that have come to light in the past years by creating dedicated teams of investigators to deal with these cases. Building partnerships with your local police department will help you to ensure that whenever a case of human trafficking is identified, the necessary relationships and supports are in place to offer immediate assistance to victims. In the case of children's aid workers, partnerships with police may also help you locate youth who leave town or are being trafficked through different cities for the purpose of commercial sexual exploitation. For example, police may be able to tell you if a girl has shown up in a jurisdiction outside of your area, and may be willing to check on a girl who is working in order to make sure that she is okay, even if she is not ready to exit the trafficking situation. Remember, if a child or anybody else is in immediate danger, always call 911. Let us now look at how children's aid societies can help support other professionals who work with children.
And I'm not sure if this only applies to Canada or the States, but 911 is for anyone in immediate danger. If they're not in immediate danger, there is no need to call 911. So unless you are at a place where someone immediately needs rescue or needs help, feel free to listen to what the survivor actually needs in order to actually provide the correct help that they would need. So I'm actually trying to let's go through the CAS referrals and then the medical forensic referrals and skip provincial programs because I don't think that is as helpful.
Children's aid societies are another important partner for anyone who might come in contact with a trafficked child. They can provide services to a child who has been directly trafficked themselves, trafficked along with one or both parents, or is born to a person who is being trafficked, such as in a forced marriage situation that involves exploitation. Let's review the...
By the way, CAS referral stands for Child Aid Society Services. So it's a society just for children. And if there is any child needing help, that is a program that we have here in Ontario.
Because each CAS is run by its own board of directors, the services offered will change depending on the location of the society and the needs of that community. Services can include family visits, help acquiring medical treatment, ensuring educational needs are being met, community educational training, parenting help, financial planning and career coaching, sexual abuse treatment programs, play therapy, free fun activities for families, life skills development, legal advice, and referrals to needed resources. To locate your local CAS, please consult the list of CAS agencies across the province by clicking on the link on your screen. You can then visit their website. As we review the available services for human trafficking victims in Ontario, remember that these cases are extremely complex, and in order to meet the needs of children, you may need to provide services and referrals for parents who have been caught in a trafficking situation.
Answering the questions that you as a person that's being trafficked are very important. Like, you need to be able to answer, where am I going to go? Am I going to be safe?
When making referrals on behalf of a trafficked child, Please note that some departments and agencies may be bound by reporting protocols that require them to contact the Canada Border Service Agency or Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada if they encounter a person with no legal immigration status in Canada. Therefore, in such cases, it is essential to regularize a person's immigration status before contacting such an organization to avoid detention and deportation. Similarly, while your organization's policy may ensure the confidentiality of client information, other agencies may not, or may even be required to disclose certain types of information. Therefore, it is important to be well informed before making a referral. When working with a trafficked child, keep them informed about what is happening and encourage them to participate in the decision-making process as much as possible, and to a degree that is appropriate for their age and mental development. Now let's look at the provincial programs offering support to victims of human trafficking.
Okay, so there are a lot of provincial programs that we have. You guys can watch this in your own time. But right now we will be going into, again, this is still provincial, but still, there are a lot of other supports that we can have in Ontario and around the country and around the world.
Through a network of 35 hospital-based sexual assault or domestic violence treatment centers established by the Ontario Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. The centers provide 24/7 emergency care to women, children, and men who have been sexually assaulted or are victims of domestic violence. Services include emergency medical and nursing care, crisis intervention, collection of forensic evidence, medical follow-up and counseling and referral to community resources. Click on the link on your screen to locate the closest center in your area and to find out more about the services that are available. Persons who do not have a valid health card may also access healthcare services through community health centers across the province. To locate the closest community health center, please click on the link on your screen or consult the Additional Resources section.
Okay, so that actually concludes the 4 units. Let's play the congratulations, because why not?
Congratulations! You have now completed the online training on human trafficking for professionals who work with children. In this module, we looked at human trafficking regulations in Canada and services available for referrals.
Okay, we don't need that anymore. I just wanted to let you guys know, congratulations. And so I would want everyone to now go through click on this quiz. So here is a quiz that it's called Quiz Professionals Working with Children. Once you are on this page, please give me a thumbs up and we will give you guys a minute to attempt the quiz and take it. Yeah. So as long as you get a 6% and above, you will be able to get your certificate. So Bill and Jessica is already on. Amy has a hand raised. Is there a question or is that like a thumbs up? And then what about the rest of you guys? Chloe's all good. Cindy's all good. Kat, Allie, Stella, are we all good? Okay. Perfect. So yeah, I'll give you guys until so it's now 2:40. I'll give you guys 15 minutes at 2:55. Well, my time 2:55. So whatever o'clock you guys are, so like at the 55th minute of this hour, we'll be back and we will go through the answers really quickly and we will allow you guys to have time to upload your certificates. Have fun, guys. Okay, so the majority of us are done. Please don't leave yet because you guys aren't really uploading the thing that I want you guys to upload. So once you're done, let's go through the questions really quickly. I think most of it is pretty self-explanatory. This one, some people always get it wrong, but it's mainly opportunistic individuals. And I think the rest is pretty easy, and 40%, the data doesn't really matter, but yeah. So there is a certificate of completion. Once you are done, go back to the main page, which is of the course, which is this page. And it should have 4 modules, and then the questions, quiz, and then additional resources. Feel free to view it when you have time, but completion certificate. And then you click on what is this called? View certificate. And this is the PDF that I want you guys to download and then upload into. So a lot of you guys just uploaded your quiz page. That is not what I want you guys to do. And this is the page with your name on it. And that is what you should upload. Again, once you are done uploading, please let me know, and everyone is good to go. Thank you so much for joining. We have the opportunity to ask Homera direct questions this week. Homera has like a child gathering at her place this week and next week, so we will mainly be like watching recording sessions. But if you do have any questions, you can definitely put them in Q&A, and Phoebe and I will be passing them on. If you do want to meet her sometime, we can definitely arrange a session maybe towards the end of August or later on in the year, because she's a really busy person and we also have to, you know, work out a lot of logistics. So for right now, I would suggest you to just enter that into Q&A, and we will be, you know, figure things out later. We'll have to wait and see. Any other questions? Amy, you have your hand up. Do you have like a question, or did you just forget to lower it? Okay.
I do have a question.
Yep.
For the project, like, do I need to make a PowerPoint or something, or just do some research and like share with everyone?
Well, not really. You can do it however you would like. And for some people, they just gave me like a Google Doc for those who already turned in, of course. And so a Google Doc, anything in the form that you are, you know, comfortable with. I just kind of want to see how many of you guys actually learned something from this course, and that is about it. So as long as you are showing understanding in the work that you are doing, we're all good with that. Yep. And also, Amy, your work turned in. You turned in this link. I'm not sure what it is, but yeah, feel free to fix it when you have time. Perfect. So thank you so much for joining in today. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think we'll be, I don't even know what we're doing tomorrow anymore. I'll let you guys know later. And yeah, have a good evening, have a good afternoon, have a good day wherever you are, and hope you enjoyed today's session. Bye, guys.